After that exchange, thoughts laid heavy on Shelian's mind the rest of the way. He tried prodding for more, but every response Hua Chang gave him thereafter all seemed to mean, "That's all I'll say on the subject." Thus, Shelian didn't pursue it anymore. When they returned to Puchi's shrine, dawn had not yet broken upon the horizon. Pushing the door open, Shelian could see that all the dishes were cleaned and put away. Lang Ying, Gusi, and Chirong were all sleeping inside, a blanket covering them, looking very comfortable. It seemed that after he left, there really was someone who took care of things attentively, and they had already left silently. This time, when Shelian returned, there was a large pile of prayers waiting. Puchi Shrine had never received this many prayers before, but he didn't think that it had anything to do with that wealthy merchant spreading his good name. That's right, that wealthy merchant who lived in town finally came to fulfill his promise. However, even if he did come by, he either didn't notice the very obvious sign that Shelian had placed right out front, or he purposely ignored it. He also didn't donate however much money he promised that he would. The most important purpose of his coming here was to gift a brocade banner, and he enthusiastically presented it to Shelian before all the folks in the village. Shelian rolled it open unsuspecting and immediately folded it closed. Even so, the giant words on that brocade banner were deeply ingrained in his mind. It said, "Return babes through miraculous hands." After sending that wealthy merchant off, he exhaled a long sigh. He'd been worried every day, wondering when the shack would finally collapse. He really didn't know when it could be repaired. Hua Chang, who had been leaning against the door, seemed to have guessed what he was sighing over. He said, "I've long wanted to say something. If Gurga doesn't feel secure living here, why not just move somewhere else?" Shelian shook his head and said, "That's easy for you to say, Sun Lang. Where would I move to?" Hua Chang smiled. "Why not move over to my place?" he said. Shelian knew that those words couldn't be as nonchalant as they sounded. But ever since the joke the other night, a small shadow had manifested in his heart for some reason. He no longer dared to respond to anything Hua Chang said, using that joking demeanor, only acknowledging with a smile and inclining his head. As for those prayers received, although they were nothing more than mundane, such as the old ox broke his leg and couldn't haul the plough, or the wife in the house got pregnant and couldn't help in the fields, nevertheless, they were still prayers, and he must treat all worshippers equally. After a couple of days, Shelian responded to the prayers and went into the village to help plough and plant. Since Hua Chang had been staying with him, naturally he went along to play. Because this was hard manual labor, at first Shelian hadn't wanted him to work too, but he refused to be persuaded. Thus, the two changed into coarse clothing, rolled up their sleeves and pant legs, and entered the waters of the rice paddy fields. The large expanse of lush green rice paddy fields was littered with bustling farmers, and amongst them there were two silhouettes that were particularly conspicuous. Even if he was dressed in Shelian's gritty clothing, not a single bit of Hua Chang's impressive air could be hidden away. More like that ragged outfit only accentuated his face and figure. The two of them were both pale-skinned, their arms beautiful, their legs long and straight, painting an eye-catching, scintillating picture amongst the muddy-faced farmers. It made the village girls, who were used to seeing boars, blush with their hearts racing. They kept sneaking glances, and as they transplanted seedlings, soon their grafts were planted off course and into curved lines, making them laughingstocks. Hua Chang's blanched skin was a color that was devoid of blood. Shelian, on the other hand, was rosy through the translucent white. Due to his natural physique, the more he sweat, the more his skin became fair like jade. With the blazing sun overhead, he had only worked for a short while before his entire person was white like powder. The dry heat was intolerable, and he kept wiping at the beads of sweat rolling down his collarbones. However, he thought of how ghosts were all creatures of the shadows, disgusted with the sun, and knew that Hua Chang must be even more irritated. Shilian turned his head to look over, and sure enough, Hua Chang also straightened up languidly, using a hand to block out the sun, his eyes squinting. Hiding in the shadows of his right hand, he was also gazing in Shilian's direction. Shilian walked over and pressed the bamboo hat down on his head. "Here," he said. Hua Chang was slightly taken aback at first, but he soon squinted into a smile. "Okay," he said. Although Hua Chang said that he was going to work in the fields just for fun, when he actually got down to work, he was way faster than Shilian, swift and efficient, extremely skilled. An hour later, Shilian finished transplanting his field of paddies, but he was already sore and in pain, knocking and massaging his waist. Hua Chang came over to help him out. Shilian took a look, and he couldn't believe that after only so long, Hua Chang had actually silently finished a large field all by himself. Each green rice stalk standing in the watery paddies, neat and orderly, pleasing to the eye. Shilian said earnestly, "San Lang, you really do learn fast. You don't need to help me. Go sit and rest. Drink some water or something." Thus, Hua Chang went to the field ridges to retrieve water. The village head had been watching on the side for some time, and just then he gave a thumbs up. He said, "Dao Zhang, which house does that little lad belong to? He's so diligent, so amazing. Just one of him is as good as 10 men. If any girl is to catch his eye, then it'd be her fortune." Shilian puffed and laughed, but it wasn't long before a few others came secretly to inquire too. Hey, Dao Zhang, where's that little lad staying at your shrine from? Is he married yet? There couldn't be a wife in his household yet, right?" Shilian didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and answered vaguely. I guess. He's young, so it's not time to consider anything yet." Those villagers immediately said, "Well, that's not right. It's precisely because he's young that the affair has got to be settled soon. Dao Zhang, you gotta talk to him. Men gotta settle early before they can mature. Gotta build a home before anything else. That's right, young people, they won't be able to withstand lonely nights." Those villagers were all from households with daughters and wanted to dig for information. Just as Shilian was courteously turning them away, Hua Chang walked over with a bamboo water bottle dangling in his hand. "I'm married," he said. "There's a wife at home." When those villagers heard, they were greatly disappointed, but still unrelenting. "Which house is the lady from?" they asked. "Won't the little buddy tell us?" "You're not lying to us, are you? She must be virtuous and beautiful." Hua Chang raised his brows and said, That's right. Virtuous and beautiful. A real noble and gracious special someone that I've liked since I was young. I've had that crush for many years and pursued really hard before I was able to win that person over." He spoke with such serious certainty, without a hint of falsehood, that those villagers felt that there was no more to be said. They could only disperse, feeling defeated and disappointed. Shilian was spacing out, listening to him, when Hua Chang passed over a cloth and a water bottle. "Water?" he asked. Shilian took the cloth and wiped his mud-covered hands before taking the water bottle to drink a few swallows. Then he passed it back. Subconsciously, he'd bunched the cloth in his hands into a messy ball, and he wiped himself here and there. After trying to hold it in for a while, he still couldn't help but ask, "Is that true?" Hua Chang took the bamboo bottle and drank a swallow himself, his Adam's apple rolling up and down once before he lowered his head. Is what true?" he asked. Xilin raised his sleeve and wiped some sweat on the side of his face. He wondered if the sun was a little too big today because both his forehead and his cheeks were burning up. He tried his best to sound as casual as possible and smiled. He said, "There's a wife at home, virtuous and beautiful, a real noble, gracious, special someone. You've had that crush since you were young and pursued really hard before you won that person over." "Oh," Hua Chang said, "that's a lie." Xilin hadn't noticed himself, but he let out a sigh of relief. This time, his smile was genuine, and he copied Hua Chang's tone from before. "You liar," he said. Hua Chang grinned and added, "But it wasn't all a lie. I just haven't won that person over yet." Hearing this, Xilin was stunned, but Hua Chang had already turned around, leaving to keep laboring in the fields. Xilin stood where he was for a long while, dazed, before bending down and slowly going back to work. For some reason, he was feeling a little unhappy. Soon after, he discovered a small row of his crafts were off course and immediately pulled his mind back. As he worked in the fields, he tried connecting privately with the Wind Master through the private communication array. Although Hua Chang warned him against getting close to the Wind Master and his group, Xilin couldn't help it. These past few days, he tried sending messages multiple times, but still there weren't any responses, nothing but silence. Thus, he changed his tactics and reached out to Ling Wen instead. "Ling Wen," he said, "how fares Lord Windmaster? Is he a little better?" Ling Wen was instantly connected, and her voice sounded next to Xilin's ear. "Lord Windmaster, I think he's a little better." Xilin instinctively knew that she wasn't telling the truth, but he didn't pursue it. However, that did help him make his mind up and going up in a bit to take a look. Just then, Ling Wen added, "By the way, Lord Watermaster sent a gift over to you. Please remember to take a look, Your Highness." Xilin was taken aback. "A gift? There's no need for it," he said. "I haven't done anything deserving of a reward." "There's no need to be humble," Ling Wen said. "Lord Windmaster grabs anyone to accompany him when he's feeling impulsive, and you've endured hardships by his side for so long. In all manner of speaking, there's no shame in accepting the gift. Lord Watermaster said that it was nothing but a small show of gratefulness. So just take it." Xilin still didn't think it appropriate and kept it on his mind. After finishing his work and wrapping up, Hua Chang went over to the village head's house to help repair his plough, and Xilin returned to Puchi Shrine. After removing the 3 good-for-nothings, as Hua Chang called them, behind the shrine, Xilin searched all over the small abode, wondering, where's the gift? Thinking that it might have fallen in the cracks behind the donation box, he rolled up his sleeves to move it. Unexpectedly, when he tried to lift, the box was unmoving. That donation box was excessively heavy, like it had grown roots into the ground. Perplexed, Xilin took out the key and opened the box. The moment he did, the bright golden light almost blinded him. That donation box was piled thick and high with gold bars. With just a rough look, there was at least enough to turn into 1,000,000 merits. Xilin instantly threw the cover shut, pressing it down heavily with both hands, thinking, nothing but a small show of gratitude? To gift something so hefty for no reason? Was this a lip-sealing fee? At first he had considered that if it really was nothing more than a small gift, like a spiritual jade bracelet for saving power or something, then maybe it'd be best to just take it. After all, returning a gift might injure the Watermaster's face. The Watermaster was proud, so it wouldn't be a nice thing to do. But now, all right, as expected from the God of Wealth, a chest this big, filled to the brim with gold bars, Xilin had to return it. It just so happened that he'd already planned on making a trip to the heavens immediately to check up on the Wind Master. Figuring that Hua Chang wouldn't return so fast, he left a note then hoisted that oppressively heavy donation box onto his back before taking off. Unexpectedly, the moment he reached the heavenly court, it was mayhem all around. Shillian stood dumbfounded with wide eyes. The perfect, great Marshall Avenue was full of wreckage and potholes. Cracks and craters filled the street. A group of junior heavenly officials were running back and forth, and Ling Wen was squatting next to a deep crater, massaging her throbbing temple. Shillian approached and asked, "What's happened?" Ling Wen looked up and was taken aback by that giant donation box carried on his back. "Your Highness, what are you doing carrying such a big donation box up here? What's happened?" She sighed. "Don't even think about it," she said. "General Nanyang and General Xuanzhen were fighting and destroyed each other's palaces." Feng Xin and Mu Qing? Shillian was amazed. "Why are the two of them fighting again?" he asked. "What else can it be but that business with the fetus spirit?" Ling Wen said. A few of the martial guards were in discussion, debating on how to deal with the ghost mother and son. General Nanyang suggested bringing that fetus spirit to the refinery to dissolve it, since that creature really did murder a great number of people. But Xuanzhen wouldn't let him. His tone wasn't the nicest, so Nanyang said, "As if you've ever been so benevolent. Maybe you hold a guilty conscience, and so on. Your Highness, you know how it is. They're like that. Say a few words, and they raise their fists. Just look around. Look what their brawl has brought upon us. I've long since said that you martial guards really don't have a good culture. The expense for repairs in the heavenly court this year is too terrifying. I've only counted halfway, and now I've forgotten everything again. Really." Her headache really did look quite painful, Shillian said. "Then I'll leave you to it. I'll go check up on Lord Windmaster." Ling Wen looked up. "Visit Lord Windmaster?" she asked. "Don't bother, Your Highness. Lord Windmaster isn't allowing visitors right now." "Didn't you say he was a bit better?" Shillian asked. "That's what Lord Watermaster said," Ling Wen replied. "But that the Lord Windmaster is not allowing visitors were also the Lord Watermaster's words. Right now, not even I can see Lord Windmaster, so he probably needs more time to recuperate. You best not go, Your Highness." "Speaking of, isn't your donation box also too?" Shillian dropped the donation box on the ground. He said, "Then please help by giving this to Lord Watermaster for me. I haven't done anything deserving of a reward. Even if he didn't give me anything, I wouldn't say anything that shouldn't be said." He felt at ease after throwing that box down and left hastily. Ling Wen called after him from behind. Getting no response, she let it go and continued to look at that deep crater with her throbbing head. Although Shillian did leave, of course, he wouldn't descend back to the mortal realm just like that. Instead, he snuck to the esteemed palace of the Wind and Water Masters in the heavenly capital. Although the palace was thick with guards, both inside and out, a small thing like this couldn't stop Shillian. Shi Xuan had brought him over last time, so he had a general idea of where the Wind Master's bedchambers were located. He flipped over the wall and changed between running across rooftops stealthily and sneaking around on the ground. It didn't take him long before he arrived. The only thing that he worried about was that the Wind Master was not even there to begin with, having been moved by his older brother to somewhere else. Fortunately, his worry didn't come true. He climbed onto the roof and found a blind spot where others couldn't see him. He used his legs to hook onto one of the beams hanging upside down from the eaves and looked into the interior of the bedchamber. However, the moment he looked, he was shocked. Shi Xuan was trussed up tightly. His hands and legs were all bound with ropes. He was tied onto his own bed, but was still struggling unceasingly. Next to him, Shiwudu was pacing back and forth by the bed, a bowl full of something black and unknown in his hands. He paused for a moment, then suddenly walked over and force the bowl's contents down Shuqingxuan's throat.